want to say I have any regrets about any of that. Things worked out for a reason. They worked out pretty well. I've been extremely blessed with this whole ride that I've been on with athletics, and everything that I've have happened in my life is probably directly attributed to the fact that it's somewhere along the line it came back to being involved in sports.
Hey everyone, welcome to My Final Play. I'm Brian. I'm here with former Penn State lineman Rich Schonewolf. Rich, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely, Brian. Thanks for inviting me over.
Yep, I appreciate you coming and giving me the time. So we're going to get into the sport of football. And as we were talking off camera, you've got a little bit of a unique way into the game. So let's go ahead and get us started.
Well, yeah, I would say my unique entry to the game of football was I was not really, I don't think, groomed as a football player. I was a baseball player coming up through Little League.
Yeah.
Envisioned someday maybe playing in Williamsport here at the Little League World Series. That was really my true love as far as athletics go. When I got to high school, so I was always too big to play on the little youth football and the weight, it was always weight based, and I was a bigger kid, and so I never really played any organized football up through. We would play touch in the street and all the other sports that city kids play, wiffle ball, stickball, sponge ball, you name it. But as far as organized sports, it was just baseball. When I got to high school, I didn't, having not played before, I don't know if there was a process of how you go out for high school football. I went to a Catholic school in Northeast Philadelphia, Archbishop Ryan, and so there were like 7 or 8 grade schools, Catholic grade schools, that kind of feed into the high school, and there was no real connection saying, hey, come out for football or anything. So I just started school in 9th grade and found out that I knew there was a football team, but nobody ever really talked to me about it.
Yeah.
So I didn't play football as a 9th grader. Walking the hallways, the gym teacher who was our football coach, a great guy named John Quinn, he played his college football at Notre Dame. He, recognized the fact that being one of the bigger kids, he might want me to give football a try. And so he caught me in the hallway one day and asked if I'd come out for football, and I said, well, I guess I can, give it a shot. And he said, okay, we're lifting in the weight room here is after the football season, so it was probably like January or February. So I went and started to lift. I had never touched a weight in my life, didn't like it. I was weak, and everybody else was lifting a lot of weights, and I had like the little empty bar on the bench. And so I did it for a month or so, and then baseball tryouts came around, and I ended up being one of like 2 freshmen to make the JV baseball team. So stopped going to the weight room, stopped lifting, forgot all about football, and after the high school baseball season, the summer baseball season got underway, Legion or whatever, and I kind of figured, well, okay, I'm not playing football. I was just interesting conversation, but it's not probably something I'm going to do. And about a week before camp started, my high school coach called and asked if I was still coming out for the football team, and I was kind of a quiet kid growing up and wasn't real terribly confident, so I didn't really have the guts to tell him no, I wasn't coming out. So I said, oh yeah, sure, I'm still coming out. And I probably shouldn't have said that, but I did. So I was like, okay, now I got a week to try to run or do something so I'm not dying during camp. And so I did that, and showed up for football as a sophomore. Didn't know anything about a stance, and I was terrible. I don't know, why they would have looked at me at that point and say, hey, make sure we get this kid to come back again, because I couldn't do anything, and it just was very unnatural for me. But I did come back out for football my junior year, and things were just a little bit easier. Things started to click a little bit, and I ended up starting to figure out the game and what I could do and what I was good at, and ended up playing well. Still played baseball throughout high school, and still considered myself a baseball player. We ended up winning a Catholic League championship when I was a junior, which was kind of a big deal, and got to play it in Veterans Stadium in baseball, and even in football, my senior year, it was kind of an interesting run our team was on. We weren't very good in high school. My junior year, we had a lot more talent. I was one of like 2 juniors to really start on the football team, and a lot of seniors. We were pretty good. got off to a great start, and then we just kind of petered out, and an injury here or there, and we ended up finishing like 500, didn't make the playoffs for the 10th year in a row or whatever. And coming back my senior year, it was only like 2 or 3 of us returning starters,
right.
and we had a lot of other kids, and there was not much as far as an expectation of us doing well. We played our first game against West Catholic, a team that hadn't won a game the previous year. We ended up losing to them. It's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be brutal. We got to do something. So a bunch of the guys just kind of sat after the game back in our locker room and kind of talked and said, we got to, we can't allow this to happen. We got to be really more dedicated and put more into this. And I don't remember if there's anything particular we did, but we knew we were focused on not wanting to be a terrible team.
Right.
That, without a ton of talent, we ended up winning our next game and winning another game. And before you know it, we got through the season with 1 loss. And now we're in the playoffs. And, we ended up playing in the Catholic League Championship at Veterans Stadium. We ended up losing the game, but, for a team that hadn't been to the playoffs in a decade or so,
right.
For a team that with no expectations just found a way to put it together. So it was kind of a cool experience. Some good things came out of having somebody tap me in the hallway and say, "Hey, come out for the football team, would you?"
Right. So then, being that you ended up playing at Penn State, so you started your sophomore year of high school, which you said was essentially a flop.
Right, JV, probably a backup guy on JVs who got in, at the end of the game because they wanted to make sure everybody played.
Yeah, to then ending up going and getting recruited by Penn State. So what did that process look like?
For me, I think it was being in the right place at the right time. We had in the Catholic League, when I was playing my senior year, there was a big article in the Philadelphia Inquirer about the year of the lineman. We had like 6 or 7 other real big, good-sized linemen that were being recruited that went to Division I schools. Several ended up at Notre Dame, a couple at Penn State, a couple at Pitt, Maryland. So I think for me, I wasn't like one of the guys that was on the radar the year before. Some of these guys have been starting from their freshman and sophomore year, and here I was just kind of coming out of nowhere. But playing against all these guys, one team in particular played North Catholic. Both of their one was 6'6", 270. The other one was 6'4", 230 or 250. Oh, wow. They both ended up, signing with Notre Dame, and we played them, and I probably had my best game as a high school player against those 2 guys. Yeah. And I think that kind of opened up the door where people that were watching those films and watching those games said, okay, well, there's another guy out there that maybe we should be taking a look at.
Right.
And so that started to lead to some phone calls, and the recruiting really picked up during my senior year. A lot different than it is now when guys are signing as their sophomores and juniors, and their senior years are already it's a done deal. But back then it was like after your senior year was over, you took your 4 or 5 recruiting visits, and you decided by February. That part was the same. I think it was the second or some Wednesday in February you had the signing day. So I was, getting the calls, and it was kind of cool. You hear from, especially for me, it was hearing from Coach Paterno and Tom Osborne from Nebraska called, and Terry Donahue was at UCLA, and so it was just kind of cool to think that wow, these are some big name schools that are interested and looking to come visit and talk and do those kinds of things that they needed to do to get me to commit there. So went on a couple of recruiting visits. Interesting enough, I wasn't really hearing from Boston College and West Virginia, because I look at Penn State, Notre Dame, and they were the upper tier at that time. Then there's in my mind, the eastern middle tier schools, Boston College, West Virginia, and so they weren't really recruiting me, which I was a little bit surprised by. And so the schools I ended up visiting were Penn State, and then Duke and Wake Forest. I liked a lot, in Rutgers, and so I'm really in that era, they were probably even below those other Eastern schools. So I kind of looked at that was probably where my skill set was based on who was recruiting me. And I kind of thought, well, something's not right here. That I don't really think I'm good enough to be playing at Penn State. When some of these other schools aren't recruiting me, and the schools I'm getting a lot of interest from were the Dukes and Wake Forests of the world. But the fact that growing up in Philadelphia, Penn State was, the team that everybody talked about and knew, was like, well, it's kind of cool. So I'll, meet with them and have them come to my school and everything. But I don't know if that's really something that I'll be able to do, play there. So as it went through, when I got to signing day, I had decided, where I was going to go. I was going to go to Duke. And, my plan was to, that day call the other assistant coaches from Rutgers and Wake Forest and Penn State and let them know, hey, I made my mind, I'm going to go to Duke, and thanks for taking the time to recruit me. And sure enough, as I'm getting out of the shower, the phone rings, and my mom says, it's Joe Paterno's on the phone, he wants to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to talk to him. Don't tell him I can't come. He's like, you got to talk to him. And if you're not going to go there, you tell him. And he was like, listen, recruiting's over. Can I come, can you give me one more chance to talk to you?
Yeah.
And, again, it goes back to I didn't have the confidence and the courage to tell him no. So I said, well, yeah, if you really need to talk to me, I'll wait another day and talk to you. And so he flew down to Northeast Philly, in our little Northeast Philly airport there, and I met with him again. And, so I said, well, give me a day or two to think about this. And so it was probably like 3 days after signing day when I finally committed to Penn State. And I went on a long walk for miles trying to figure out, what the heck am I going to do here? I knew I could go to Duke and probably get a great education, probably play a lot,
right.
just by the nature of their program and where I was. And then I thought, well, Penn State, I don't know if I'm good enough to play there, but I thought if I could play there 1 year and you'll be on TV, you'll be going to a bowl game and playing, you might win a national championship. I thought, man, just even if I could do that for 1 year, it'd be worthwhile.
Right.
And that was ultimately what I ended up deciding to do, was roll the dice and take a chance that, well, maybe I can play there. And things worked out. Definitely worked out well.
Yeah, especially with the mindset of maybe I can get into a bowl game or play for a championship. So I mean, that's awesome. Especially to like you said, not having that confidence, that feeling of being at that level, which obviously they saw something that spoke differently. So that's really cool. Now, as far as then, once you're there, the people that you played with, the experiences that you had, it's kind of, we talked a little bit off camera, but as far as you were there for the 4 years and you guys had a bowl game all 4 years.
4 out of 5. We had one down year in the middle there where we didn't get to go to a bowl game, but
and now, in addition to that, bowl games then were a lot different than what they are now.
Yeah.
Now everybody gets a bowl game. So you guys played your freshman year. You were in one.
Yeah, we were playing for the national championship that year against Oklahoma. We were undefeated, playing a great Oklahoma team. We ended up losing that game.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, a lot of the guys had a 5th year that played in that game, and they decided to come back when a lot of them could have gone on to the NFL and played. Shane Conlins and Tim Johnson and Bob White, and a lot of guys decided, hey, let's give this one more shot.
Yeah.
Came back for their 5th year, and we ended up going 12-0 again and playing Miami for the national championship in the Fiesta Bowl, which goes down. I think I was reading somewhere where they still say it's the most watched TV game of all time. It was the first game that was moved off of New Year's Day, first bowl game. They moved it to January 2nd, so that would be its own
day.
Yeah, its own evening matchup, and it was really a great matchup between two, high-powered teams. One, Miami was a phenomenal team offensively and defensively. There was just so much. I don't know how many NFL draft picks they had, but there were a ton. And we were our just normal Penn State team, probably overachievers, but well coached, disciplined, and always in games, always giving ourselves a chance to win. And I think that's ended up what happening in that game. We played really well. We gave ourselves a chance to get ahead in the second half, and then hung on for dear life in the end. And there was, the euphoria of being in that stadium as the last interception, the Pete Giftopoulos in the end zone.
Right.
Interception, and just people going nuts, and then the locker room celebration like you see on TV in the World Series and the Super Bowls. Just phenomenal. So it was a good time to be at Penn State.
Yeah. So as far as the time that you had at Penn State, what would you say would be, aside from the national championship, what would you say would be the number one thing that you took away from that experience?
I would say just the need to just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I think because you see people, and the people would quit, leave every year. There'd be some, either freshmen coming in that, this is more than they bargained for whatever reason. An older guy decided, I've had enough. And so for me, I think it's just kind of a perseverance thing where if you just keep, even when you're, maybe discouraged or for whatever reason things aren't working out maybe quite as you want it, just keep going, keep trying.
Right.
And, eventually things will get better and good things will happen. And, so I think that was kind of the message that I took from my years there. I'm sure Joe probably spoke to that at times. About that, just if you keep working hard, good things will happen. And, that's kind of how I look back at my, college career and things, little things that maybe stick with you that, just keep persevering.
Right.
As bad as it might seem today, tomorrow will be a better day.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, you'll be around for when the success does come.
Absolutely.
So.
And then afterwards, after your time at Penn State, you were invited to the Combine.
Yes.
And then kind of walk us through what happened from there as far as that experience.
Well, that was, it's a stressful experience because what you're basically auditioning for an opportunity to get into the NFL. And, the Combine itself is a bit of a meat market where, your first couple of hours there when you show up is, in your underwear and a t-shirt or skimpy gym shorts and a t-shirt where they're like taking pictures of you from every angle. The doctors I probably had more pain from the doctors bending my elbows and knees in opposite directions to make sure ligaments were tight than I experienced when I was playing. So it was really kind of this meat market feel. And you go out and do the different testing and the 40, the shuttle, there's a bench press test, there's I probably did best on the, I think they call it the Wonderlic, but it was kind of like a mental test that you have to do in the classroom. And so that one I was pretty good. I was not a big lifter in high school or college. That was probably my downfall. Was I just wasn't a weight room guy. I was probably the baseball background, whereas you're being told you don't want to do a lot of lifting if you're a pitcher. And and I never really embraced lifting until probably like my senior year of college. I said, this is probably something I need to do more of. And then, when I had the different tryouts, I tried to do a lot more lifting. But, so you go through that process, and it's stressful because, you're kind of auditioning for something that you really want to try to achieve. And
right.
And then from there, it's just you kind of wait around for the draft. There's a couple weeks after the Combine and the draft, and you kind of hope you get drafted. I was unfortunate in that I didn't get drafted, but I did have, several offers after the draft to go and sign with a couple teams. I ended up going out to Kansas City, and it was a great experience there. When I was there in the fall, we did a part of the American Bowl where the NFL teams were going to Europe to play, one team a year. So Kansas City was the team that was chosen to play the Rams in Berlin, which was really a cool time to be over there right after the wall was knocked down, and there were still large portions of the wall, so we were able to kind of go visit the wall and chip away at our own pieces. And you could look from the West Berlin side over to East Berlin, and West Berlin's is colorful, lots of different cars and shapes and sizes and colors. And if you look over into East Berlin, you'd see all the same little boxy gray colored car. It was just like looking at a color picture versus a black and white picture between the two, parts of that city. So it was pretty cool. It was a great time to be over there. So it was a phenomenal experience to be a part of.
And then after your time with Kansas City, you ended up being in the World League, also put on by the NFL.
Yeah.
And had 2 years down in Birmingham.
Yes.
So we talked off camera as far as the final play, and you mentioned a little bit as far as the playoff, but more importantly, kind of what that transition looked like for you. So if you would get into that.
Yeah, when I finished in Kansas City and didn't make the team there, you start to think, okay, what's next? Maybe I can work out and get ready for another opportunity to go into an NFL camp. I got a call that this World League of American Football was starting, and then eventually would turn into NFL Europe. And my agent called and asked if I'd be willing to or interested in playing. I said sure, but I want to make the transition from defense to offense. See if I had this trial as a defensive lineman, didn't make it. Let me see if I can make it as an offensive lineman.
Right.
And if I can't make the World League team as an offensive lineman, obviously I won't be an opportunity to play in the NFL. and that'd be fine. But I was able to make the World League, the Birmingham Fire team, and play 2 years there on the offensive line. We made the playoffs both years, and so the second year, when you start to look back to, well, I guess that was probably my final play, and it was in a playoff game. It was just one of those situations where it wasn't a real close game, as I remember. You don't really think, I wasn't thinking at that time that was the finality of it all. I kind of felt like I'd probably get another shot in an NFL camp, at least I was hoping to. And so I didn't really think of that as being the end for me. But looking back on it, I did have a tryout with the Steelers in their camp, but when that didn't work out, you had the opportunity to maybe stick around and say, okay, do you want to do this again for a third year?
Right.
But I always kind of looked at the NFL as a possibility, but not, life defining. That even if I got a chance to play, it would be for a couple of years, and then there'd be another phase of my life. And
right.
So I think it was at that time where I started to look for, to see if there was any jobs that I'd be interested in. And sure enough, there was a sales job here in the Williamsport area with a company called Mead Johnson. I interviewed for it. Thankfully, one of the guys interviewing me was a Penn State alum, and I'd recognized my name and who I was from having played at Penn State. He encouraged the manager to hire me, and it's 25 years later, I'm still here in Williamsport and the surrounding areas working for Mead Johnson. And it all kind of goes back to the fact that those Penn State connections opened some doors for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's cool that, like you said, that the sport in general was finite. And you had that in your back of your mind as you're going through the camps. So to be able to have that closure and to just look at it as the opportunity to open other doors is definitely a great mindset to be able to pass on and to just have in general. So what would you say, other than the experiences, what would you say would be the number one thing that the sport of football has taught you?
I think it gets back to that idea of perseverance. Mm-hmm. That not every day is going to be great. You're not going to like everything you're doing. Sometimes you gotta suffer through some misery in order to get to something better. And so you gotta be willing to push through some things, some difficult periods, adversity, those kinds of things. That's kind of what I look back on and say that's really where football has helped me, is that no matter what's going on, and as bad as it might be, I know that if I just keep moving forward with a positive attitude and keep trying, that there will be a better day, if not tomorrow, in the near future. So and that's those are the kind of things that I try to impart on my kids. We were talking, I still help volunteer over in South Williamsport with the kids over there, and you try to impart that on them as well, that just keep going, keep believing in yourself, keep trying. If you talk about different things, I would say that was one area that if I could go back and do something a little differently, be having that confidence that I lacked coming out of high school, and going into college, and probably even beyond college, that I always kind of had this doubt in the back of my mind, well, geez, am I really good enough to be here? Am I really good enough to play with these guys? Am I good enough to do this? And that's obviously not something that I needed to be worried about, that I was good enough to be at that level. And I just never really convinced myself of that. So I try to share that with the kids that I deal with now, my own children as well, that believe in yourself. When you're involved and invested in these things, you are talented, you are good enough to do this. Have that confidence, and if you can approach it with confidence, your end result is going to be a lot better. Yeah,
and I think that perseverance can in part build that confidence as well.
Yeah, so, definitely.
That's definitely a great thing to think on, as far as anyone who's putting in dedication to a sport. You deserve to be there. So I appreciate that as well. So I definitely thank you for the time to be able to share your experience, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. If you did, please like and subscribe, and remember, whatever it is that you do today, approach it with the mindset of, is this my final play? Thanks a lot.